Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us live on both Facebook and YouTube from Simon & Schuster for our Black History Month panel conversation featuring some amazing YA authors, including Ebony LaDelle, Shanna Miles, Sarah Raughley, and Joy Smith. I'm Emily from Riveted by Simon Teen, and I'm so honored to be moderating today's discussion. I'm also so excited to welcome our special guests and allow them to introduce themselves and their latest books. Let's go in alphabetical order. Ebony, will you kick us off?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ebony LaDelle. I am the author of Love Radio, which is right there.
And then Shanna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, my name is Shanna Miles, and I am the author of For All Time.
I think Sarah's next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Raughley, and I'm the author of The Bones of Ruin.
And Joy.
Hi, I'm the author of Turning. I'm Joy Smith.
So many beautiful book covers. So exciting. All right, let's dive into our discussion. But a reminder, if you're watching, feel free to drop a question and we will try to get to those later. So my first question for all of you is, can you share what inspired you to write your latest book? And let's go in the same order that we did introductions in. So I'll kick it to Ebony again.
So there are so many things, but I'm gonna only say a few. One I would say is my love for love. I've honestly just love to see people happy and in fulfilling relationships, whether it is romantic or platonic. And I wanted to incorporate that into a story and show the journey of love and what it requires. It requires you to confront things that scare you. You might be insecure, but it's really fulfilling if you're able to really get in touch with yourself and what you want and what you don't want with yourself. Two, I was inspired by Detroit. I grew up in Michigan, and I just felt like, and even still, I feel like Detroit does not get enough representation or positive representation. And it's weird to me because, you don't see enough of Detroit featured on TV and films without it having a negative rep. And so much of the city is, it's a big influence on America. Like American music that we know of today came from Detroit. The auto industry came from Detroit. So it was just really weird for me not to see it. And for years, I was waiting for that book from someone from the D, and I was just like, you know what? I just got to write it. And last, I'm bringing this up because it's very recently announced. It was inspired by the show Martin. So I don't know if any of y'all watch Martin, but if you notice, Prince is a DJ. So for people who have not watched Martin, it's a 90s sitcom. It's really ridiculous, but it's a lot of fun. Martin is a DJ. His wife is Gina. She's very career oriented, and they just have this community of friends and family. And I kind of wanted to, showcase that in the story.
Hi, my book For All Time. It's my turn to go. I'm going to tell you guys I was writing a historical novel and I finished it and I loved it. And it was based on an escape story, an escape love story. But it just wasn't something that I could sell at the time. So I was thinking about other things I want to get into, especially with historical fiction, because there's so many different points in history, especially American history, where Black people aren't celebrated, our history isn't highlighted. And I wanted to kind of dig into those eras. So I started writing treatments for, I have 1920s Philadelphia. I had a treatment that was, in Paris during the Revolution. I had a treatment, just little short stories that was in 90s Brooklyn, early 90s, just kind of a love story. And I kept using the same couple in each one of those little tiny short stories. And I wanted to figure out after a while, what if I could make them just one book? What it would be, this was a really epic time travel type of thing. So as I started to kind of weave that together, it kind of organically came together. So now I have my book where we get to try time travel, and we get to have this epic love story that goes from 14th century gal all the way to 24th century space colony, which is so much fun.
I love those answers. For me, I actually, I think I'm on a similar train in that I was looking for representation in certain books and certain stories and didn't find them. And in this case, the 19th century London and Britain. I love reading books set in those in that era. I love watching movies like Sherlock Holmes, Enola Holmes, set in that era. But what's interesting is that you usually don't see a lot of Black characters. I don't know if anyone's watched like Penny Dreadful. You might see like one or so Black character, and there's no attempt to really go into what it was like to be Black in, London in the 19th century, right? Or anywhere in Europe in the 19th century. What was it like to not be white? And I think I just wanted to center Black people and people of color in this kind of setting, repopulate Victorian London with BIPOC, I guess, characters. And The Bones of Ruin is about an African tightrope dancer. You can see her here, Iris, who can't die, and she's kind of embroiled in this tournament to the death in 19th century London. And it's very cool, but it's the kind of thing that I would like to see. I had to do a lot of research into it, historical research. And it really means that a lot of people can kind of go back and see Black history, the history of human zoos, the history of, circuses and music and all of this stuff that kind of, that we just don't get taught in schools. So that was largely my motivation, is to kind of uncover a bit of our history as Black people that we just don't have access to, I think, in Western education systems.
My turn. Okay, so Turning, I was really inspired to write Turning, which is about a Black ballerina who she gets into an accident and she can't dance anymore. But I was really inspired by the girls I went to school with, who were like really dope Black girls, really passionate, really good at like what they were really good at. And so I wrote about a girl who's really passionate and really loves what she loves doing and wants to do it at every cost. So that's why I wrote Toni, and that's what inspired me.
I feel very inspired hearing about all of your inspiration. My next question is hopefully not too tricky, but it might be. I'm curious, what do you hope a reader takes away from your book? And this time, let's start with you, Shanna.
Okay. Well, I'm hoping that any reader will take away the idea that Black people existed in all points in time, and that there was love and adventure and story in all times. I also want to have them take away just this warm feeling of having explored a love story that was so big and so wide that this boy, Bayard, couldn't let it go. So often we see, Black boys who have to be tough or are victimized. And this, I just want him to be a kid in love. And I hope that they took that away.
This is a good question. What do I want people to take away? First of all, I want people to have a good time reading The Bones of Ruin. You look at the cover. You're promised a good time, and like folks fighting and doing all kinds of things. So I want people to have fun. I also just want people to know that Black people, yes, again, like Shanna said, Black people existed at all points in time. And this might seem weird, but every single time I write a book with a Black character in it, that's the main character, I just want people to open up to the idea of reading through the perspective of a Black person and not have all these preconceived notions like, well, but this is a Black character. She should be like this. She should have these, sets of worries, and she should be this kind of person. And, she should have this kind of love interest, or maybe she shouldn't have any love interest, because I think there's all kinds of media that has perpetuated this idea that Black girls, they're not worthy of love and romance and things like that. And so people kind of sometimes come across books like ours and they see a Black girl with a lot of love interests, people vying for her attention, and they're like, this is strange to me, because they're not used to it, right? So I would like people to just come away with obviously a good time, but to understand that Black people, like Shanna said, existed in all points in time, and that we had loves, we had lives, we had adventures, and just open their minds up to the possibilities.
For me, I want readers to take away that, a lot of self-love, a lot of loving yourself, even through hard times. There's not one way to grieve. There's not one way, to be that, also there are Black girls in ballet, they're out there, they're doing their things. You just have to look for them. And, I just want to promote like ballet and like Black girls doing ballet and looking great at it and being great at it and being supported through it. And that's what I want readers to take away.
So I love how everybody has reminded me I should actually have my book closer to the camera. So thank y'all. My answer is very similar to everybody else's. One of the things that my friends used to tell me to do when I was like young was that I should write a relationship book. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, that sounds horrible. So I guess this is like the self-help or relationship book that they wanted me to write. I just wanted to show what good love looks like, particularly in the Black community. And when I say like good love, it's like in these pages, it's not just romance, although that's a major theme of the book. It's like what Black love looks like in community, with family, with friends. And so I'm hoping that like all of those things show on the pages. And also that if you want good love, you need healthy love. And in order to have healthy love, you have to be prepared to receive it. And I think that is an issue that a lot of people, deal with when they could have, this great person that walks into their life, but they sabotage because they weren't ready to receive that love. So like Joy was saying, self-love is a huge part of Love Radio. And that's what I hope people take away from it.
Ebony, I'm coming to you for all my love advice. Actually, all of you could give me some great advice. You guys definitely need to read all of these books for all of the love advice and more. A reminder, if you're watching, you can ask questions for the panelists in the comments. We will try and grab those and answer them at the end. My next question is, you all have varying degrees of experience in the publishing industry. We've got debut novelists to working in the industry. What was the most surprising thing you've learned about publishing with this book? And I'll have Joy start with this one.
I'm going to say the time that it takes. It takes a really long time. I know books don't just get written and, printed and they're on shelves, but like it takes years, and it's like, wow. And then you're like, what do I do in like all these years? And you have a lot to do. And then there's a lot of time, and then there's not a lot of time at the same time. So yeah, time.
I'll go. I would say how amazing a good copy editor is. So I am one of the people that work in the industry. I've never had to work with a copy editor before. And then when I got my notes back, my copy editor was like, Ebony, you said that Danny was looking out the window and the sun was rising. And you said at, 5 a.m. But in September, it's actually 7 a.m. I'm like, okay, girl, my bad. Like, I didn't realize like how detailed oriented they are. And it really is nice to know that like, if I'm messing up something like that, someone is there to help me. And also like, how if an actress wins an Oscar and then they have like the music and they cue the lights and everything. I definitely felt that way when I turned in my acknowledgments because they were way too long. So that's what I also learned. Like, you can't have a 25-page acknowledgement section.
So go on.
Okay, Sarah. I was gonna say how supportive the writing community is. Like, the debut writing community has been really, really supportive. And once you kind of like, hi, I'm signed to whoever. I've got a book coming out that you need so many different people to like ask questions, and people are just really nice and really supportive and really willing to work with you and help you and to answer questions and to promote your work. And it's really been helpful, and I've been really grateful.
Yeah, I think as well, like just how supportive people are, readers, bloggers, and there's this wide network out there. I didn't know, I've published before. I published the Effigy series also through Simon and Schuster. Available at a bookstore near you. Go get it. And I also, with this book, I kind of started to understand a little bit more about social media and just how self-driven I think authors have to be, and that there's always like a group of people that are willing to promote your book, willing to read your book and talk about it on Instagram, on their blogs, and so on and so forth. It used to be kind of like, oh, it was on reviews or on Amazon or something like that, or some other places. And now you have all kinds of places, all kinds of social media platforms. As an author, you do kind of have to be self-motivated, and you kind of have to be like, sometimes I feel like you have to be a writer and also like some kind of social media influencer as well. Like, you need to understand that part of thing in order to promote your books and get them out there. But it's nice to know that there's all kinds of networks and all kinds of people willing to help. And this is a plug, but read The Bones of Ruin. And if you read it, talk about it on TikTok, Book Talk, Instagram, hashtag Book Talk, and let's have it go viral. Why not? So yeah, there's all kinds of ways to promote oneself, and that's pretty cool.
That's a good reminder that you should never be afraid to shout about the books you love. It's only a good thing. Speaking of love, and since it's still February and kind of Valentine's season, and each of your stories deals with themes of love, we've got self-love, love that spans the ages, modern love. I would like to know what made you want to focus on love. And Sarah, let's start with you this time.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily see this story as focusing on love. It's really a large sort of like epic fantasy adventure, but I'm like a big anime and manga fan. And a lot of the stuff that I like tends to be stories that are epic, but that include love, but it's not, a love story necessarily. Like one of my favorite anime of all time is like Vision of Escaflowne, which is so like obscure, or Princess Tutu, or even like more shonen, quote unquote, boy manga, like Naruto and stuff like that. Like, there's this larger story, there's this larger adventure, there's action, there's lots of characters, it's epic, but love is also a part of it. And I think the reason why these stories become so memorable is because, love is something that everybody experiences. It's just, in terms of media and stuff like that, I think it's harder to find stories in which you have Black people that are front and center. And a lot of that is just due to a lot of prejudices and, ideas that Black people don't experience love or romance, or that those stories aren't interesting or important, or that especially Black women aren't deserving or worthy of love and all that stuff. All of these like terrible stereotypes. So I was happy to be able to kind of try and break through that a little bit with this book.
I think at the core of Turning is just kind of like everyone has that one thing that they're so obsessed with that they love so much, and that's my character with ballet, and that's me with like my theater passion. And I don't know, I just feel like love kind of, it really does make the world turn around. It doesn't have to be somebody, it can be something too. And I think people do so much for what they do love, and also, or they don't do enough for what they do love. And I think that's it.
Okay, I'll go. A big, for me, self-love is very important. And I think self-love will be in all of my stories. And it's because I realized this in the last few years that ever since I was little, I was always like the one giving advice about self-love, even if I didn't realize it. Like I was the friend that was like, he's no good for you. He's ghosting you. Like he doesn't deserve you. And it wasn't trying to get my friends to be cocky or play games, but I just wanted them to always realize they were the catch and to know their worth. So I just think that's going to be a theme of mine for whatever I write in the future.
I wanted big, juicy, whole heart, whole body love. It is Black History Month, and I want to say that Black love is revolutionary. It is a counterweight. And there it has to be a story of love throughout all of the trauma that we have, experienced throughout time, through all those different things. We would not be here without Black love. But we don't get to see it because those stories are not told, mostly by Black people. And there's a reason why romance is the biggest literary genre. Like it outsells everything else, but it doesn't get the kind of love or merit that other genres get, even though that's what people want. They want to hear and see and experience and get that feeling that, their life is precious to someone. And it was very, very important to me that we had a Black girl making this Black boy precious to her, and then vice versa, this Black boy loving on this Black girl and having her being the most precious thing to him. It was very important for me to make that happen.
You've got chills. Mm-hmm. We are always getting questions for authors about writing advice. So I want to know, what is the best and the worst writing advice that you've gotten? And we can go back to our original order. I'll have Ebony kick us off.
So the best writing advice I got was actually from writer Danielle Clayton, which was, if you have scenes that you want to delete, to not delete them. Like if there's a scene that's not working and you want to cut it, just put it in another document. And I would be writing something and then delete something and then be like, oh crap, I could have used that later. So that was really helpful to get that advice. Worst advice I've gotten, it's kind of weird because it's not really writing advice, but it is for me, because I've worked in the industry for a little bit now, is Black people don't buy books. And the reason why that was really bad advice for me was because I came into the industry wanting to be a writer, and I've worked at like basically all the big houses, and I've heard this in multiple meetings at multiple points in my life. And so for me, it was telling me like, okay, then I shouldn't be a writer because I'm hearing this, all the time. But my counter to that was, okay, prove them wrong. So if I can work on some marketing and help some authors sell books, then I can say, actually, we do push units, like check our receipts. I don't know. So that was the worst writing advice for me that actually turned out to be something to drive me to eventually write.
I think my best writing advice was just to keep writing. It's like, what do you do after you write that first book? Because writing that first book is like, okay, I did it. And now I'm going to package it up. And now everyone's going to want it. And you're just waiting. Well, they may not want that first book. And the waiting is a really long process, waiting for, agent to get back to you, waiting for you to come back from sub, waiting for a copy. There's a lot of waiting. So what do you do in the meantime? Keep writing. The worst writing advice that I got was to write every day. I have, I'm 40. I'm an old, and and I have kids and a full time job, and it's like I don't, I won't say like to discourage people who are older or even people who are younger, because I see a lot of like 25-year-olds like, am I too old to get into this, that, and the other? It's like, no, it's just you're gonna have life, and then you're gonna have your creative life, and you can make those two work, and they may not always match up on the same day, but they still get to exist.
I think the best writing advice I ever had was just to pack away all of your preconceived notions of like what it means to be a writer. I think when I first started, especially when you're not really into writing, like you're kind of writing on your own, but you're not in the industry yet. And so when you hear of book deals, it's usually the really big ones. I think Britney Spears just got like, 15 mil. And I'm waiting for that book. Don't worry about that. We're all perched for that book, believe me. But, like we hear about all of these, like, oh, this author that's never written a book before, 18 years old, got a 7-figure deal and it's a bestseller and blah, blah, blah. And it really kind of skews your expectations as to what writing really is. And writing is typically, just a lot of ups and downs. It's usually a slog. It's usually really hard to, just keep writing. I think maybe that's one of the reasons why people say write every day, even though that's not feasible for a lot of people, is because writing is such a slog. And it's not going to be like this Hollywood blockbuster story. A lot of us are just trying to keep writing and to get through that slog and to get through that grind and to not give up. So I think once I got rid of all of those preconceived notions, I was able to kind of deal with the ups and downs of publishing a little bit better and think to myself, like, more practically, okay, how do I just keep going and keep, with this dream of mine, which is to tell stories. And the worst advice that I ever got was that I have to keep trying to make my work Blacker. And the reason why I find this bad advice is because it's like typically like what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? Like, make your work Blacker, and it's typically people who aren't even Black, in the industry have told me, like, make it Blacker. It's like, well, what does that mean? Your main character sounds too white. Huh? I don't get that. Or your fantasy is not Black enough. It's not Afrocentric enough. It's like, well, I'm Nigerian, Canadian. I grew up in like where Shania Twain grew up. I don't know, like in Timmins, Ontario. I am who I am. I want to write the stories that I want to write. I don't want to be dictated by the publishing industry or by anyone in the industry. This is what a Black book should look like. These are the elements that should be in a Black fantasy or a Black book. These are the kinds of things, like, it has to include police brutality, I guess, or it has to include very strong, takes on racism and this and this and that and that and that and the third. And it's like, you know what? It's Black History Month. Let Black people write what they want to write from their hearts and tell you the stories that are in here. And, that's what I subscribe to.
I want to piggyback on what Shanna and Sarah is saying about keep writing. I think that's pretty much the best and like the worst writing advice, at least for me, because like yeah, I do want to keep writing, and it's a good thing to keep writing, but also at the same time there were like years where I didn't write at all, and it kind of feels like the worst writing advice to hear. Keep writing, keep writing, and then you can't write. But I don't know, I think it is the best thing you can do, but it's also the worst thing that you can do sometimes. As writers, we want to always put our thoughts on the page, and we want to write things that make us happy or things that make us sad. And like we have all these different, experiences that we want to put to paper and share with people or maybe not share with people. But I don't know. I feel like keep writing is probably the best thing that you can do, but maybe not every day, but keep writing. It doesn't matter when you get back to it, but just keep writing.
One final question. As we celebrate Black History Month, do you have any go-to recs that center the Black experience or favorite Black authors that you'd like to talk up before we close out? And if you don't, that's okay too, but this is your chance if you want to shout anyone out. And let's go backwards this time. It can be any book that you want to recommend. So Joy, do you want to kick us off if you have someone?
I do. I am such a big fan of Brandy Colbert's work, and I think the first book I read was her debut, Point, which is also about a Black ballerina, and I think she just spans so much of like the Black girl experience and like all her different novels, and like I don't know, it's so relatable, and it's like I'm like, oh, so nice. Like all her books, I'm always like, oh, that's so nice. Like I can see like pieces of like myself or like learn something new, and I really enjoy her work. I really do.
Anyone else have any favorites?
I want to shout out, and I have been shouting out for a while. If you do not know Lamar Giles, I feel like his YA is criminally underrated in that he hasn't more popular than he is. And I want to, highlight a specific title just as a kind of counterweight to like, Valentine's Day. We're talking about love and romance. He wrote a book. It's not so pure and simple about a boy who joins a purity club at church because his crush since kindergarten has just become newly single. And it's a really funny and heartfelt. It's a contemporary fiction novel, and it has these specific themes of like toxic masculinity and how it appears and how you can tease it out and what it feels like to that person to have it called out and not recognize what they're doing. And it could only be written by, a man. And we definitely need that perspective. So I would, definitely pick that up. Not So Pure and Simple by Lamar Giles.
Yeah, I think it's great to support any Black author. I think we all tend to be a little underrated. So if you find anything on the internet or at your bookstore, even if you've never heard of that author, just try and pick up those books anyway. But I would say I actually teach at a university, a new job, and I taught last term, I taught African-American women writers, and I really think that there are certain writers that everybody should read at least once, especially, we're living in an age where books are being banned as well, which is really unfortunate. So I have Toni Morrison's Beloved here. I think these are classic books that you absolutely should read. Alice Walker's The Color Purple. Just give a shout out if you've ever read this. Zora Neale Hurston, Their Eyes Were Watching God. Very seminal works that you'll be surprised how many people haven't read it. And as well, you see my little sticky notes. Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl is, I think, one that a lot of people don't really know about. And this is written by, Harriet Jacobs, who escaped slavery, right? So this is written by a slave or by an ex-slave talking about her experiences. And it's what we call a slave narrative, right? If anyone has read Frederick Douglass and such, you might have heard of slave narratives, but it's just good to have an understanding of the history of Black writing and just how long Black people, Black women have been writing for. And we are lucky enough to be part of this longer history of Black women writing. And I just hope to continue that.
To add on to what some of Sarah's recommendations, in Love Radio, the main character, Danny, she is sort of dealing with her own internal struggles, and she writes in journals, and she writes to some of the great Black writers of our time. And so in addition to Toni, I would say Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks. Zora Neale Hurston is one of my favorites. And I would also say just read every Black book that's on the banned book list right now, because I guarantee you it's on the banned book list for a reason.
I hope you all were taking notes in the audience. So many good book recs. My TBR just grew a lot. I would like to thank Ebony and Shanna and Sarah and Joy for joining us for this Black History Month discussion. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll see you again soon. Make sure you follow these authors on social media and pick up their books, and follow @SimonTeen for more. Thank you.